I used to believe love arrived loudly, with fireworks, with violins, with some unmistakable, cinematic sign that the universe had signed off on it. But when I met Ethan Carter, love arrived quietly, like the first snowfall of the year. Soft, unexpected, transformative. It was late October in Boston. The air smelled like roasted chestnuts and rain-soaked pavement. I had ducked into Harbor Street Books to escape the cold, hugging my coffee cup like it could hold my life together. That's when I heard him laugh. Not a polite laugh. Not a rehearsed one. A real, unfiltered, head-tilted-back laugh that filled the quiet bookstore and made three strangers glance over in irritation. I turned, and there he was. Tall, dark hair that refused to stay neatly combed. A navy sweater pushed up at the sleeves. He was apologizing to the cashier while still smiling, holding a copy of The Great Gatsby like it had personally betrayed him. "I swear I didn't mean to laugh," he said. "But who underlines Gatsby with a pink glitter pen?" I shouldn't have said anything, but I did. "Someone who believes in dramatic irony," I replied without thinking. He looked at me. Not past me. Not through me. At me. And something shifted. His eyes were warm brown, not sharp, not piercing, but steady. Curious. "You defending pink glitter?" he asked. "I'm defending commitment," I said. "If you're going to annotate Fitzgerald, you commit." He walked over. Just like that. No hesitation. "What's your name?" he asked. "Madeline." He nodded like he was testing how it sounded in his head. "I'm Ethan." And somehow, in that quiet bookstore filled with dust and old paper and rain tapping against the windows, it felt like something irreversible had just begun. We didn't plan our first date. It just happened. He offered to buy my coffee since I had publicly defended glitter vandalism. I agreed, pretending I wasn't already replaying the way he had said my name. We walked 3 blocks in the cold, our shoulders brushing occasionally, not intentionally, but not accidentally either. "Tell me something real," he said as we waited for the light to change. "Real?" I asked. "Yeah, not the resume version. Not the dating app version. Something honest." I studied him. Most men led with charm. Or performance. He led with curiosity. "I'm afraid of being ordinary," I admitted quietly. The traffic light turned green, but we didn't move. "Ordinary how?" he asked. "Like, waking up at 50 and realizing nothing I did mattered." He didn't laugh. Didn't brush it off. "I think you're already disqualified from ordinary," he said. "Why?" "Because ordinary people don't worry about it." The way he said it, steady, certain, made something inside me soften. That night stretched into 3 hours. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into walking along the harbor with wind tangling my hair and Ethan telling me about the architecture firm he was trying to build from nothing. "I want to design spaces that make people feel something," he said. "Like what?" "Safe. Inspired. Seen." He glanced at me. "Kind of like how you made me feel in that bookstore." And that was it. That was the moment I fell. Not because it was smooth. Not because it was dramatic. But because it felt real. The months that followed felt like stepping into sunlight after years of gray. We built rituals. Sunday morning pancakes in his tiny apartment with the broken dishwasher. Late-night drives with no destination, music playing too softly to drown out our conversations. We'd lie on his living room floor, staring at the ceiling, talking about childhood fears and future dreams. He told me about his father walking out when he was 12. "I promised myself I'd never disappear on someone I love," he said once, tracing circles on my palm. I didn't know then how much that promise would come to mean. I told him about my mother's illness, how watching her fade had planted a quiet terror in me. "I don't want to disappear either," I whispered. He turned toward me, propped up on his elbow. "You won't," he said. "Not on my watch." His thumb brushed my cheek like he was memorizing the shape of it. We weren't perfect. We argued about stupid things, whose turn it was to buy groceries, why he left cabinet doors open, why I overanalyzed everything. But even our arguments ended in laughter. Even our silences felt full. One night, standing on the rooftop of his building, city lights blinking around us like distant stars, he wrapped his coat around both of us. "I've never felt this steady with anyone," he admitted. Steady? I teased. Yeah, he said. Like no matter what happens, this is solid. I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Strong. Certain. I love you, he said for the first time. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply true. And I said it back, not because I felt pressured, not because I was supposed to, but because loving him felt like the most natural thing I had ever done. I didn't know then how fragile steady could be. I didn't know how quickly sunlight could shift into shadow. All I knew was that in that moment, wrapped in his coat, under a sky wide enough to hold all our promises, I believed love would protect us. I believed love would be enough. And maybe that was the beginning of everything. If love arrived quietly, then loss did too. It didn't crash into our lives like a storm. It seeped in. Slow. Subtle. Almost polite. At first, I blamed the weather. Boston winters have a way of stealing color from everything. The sky turns into a flat sheet of gray. The air feels heavier. Even laughter seems to echo differently. But this wasn't the weather. This was me. It started with the mornings. I used to wake up before Ethan, tracing the line of his jaw with my eyes, feeling full in a way I didn't have words for. Now I woke up tired. Bone tired. The kind of exhaustion sleep couldn't touch. Rough night? He asked one morning, brushing my hair away from my face. Just didn't sleep well, I lied. He studied me longer than usual. Ethan always noticed things. That was the problem. At work, I found myself staring at my screen for minutes at a time, unable to remember what I had just read. My thoughts felt distant, like they were happening somewhere else. I started canceling plans. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just little things. Can we skip dinner tonight? I'm exhausted. Maybe let's stay in instead of going to Julia's birthday. Ethan didn't complain. Not once. He'd just nod and say, of course. Come here. And I'd curl into him on the couch while some show played in the background. His arm around me felt steady. Protective. But something inside me was flickering. And I couldn't explain why. The first time he said it out loud was on a Thursday night. We were brushing our teeth side by side. It was such a normal moment. So painfully ordinary. You seem far away lately, he said, mouth half full of toothpaste. I froze. I'm right here. He rinsed, then turned to face me. No, you're not. His voice wasn't angry. It was scared. I'll be talking and you'll smile, but it's like you're somewhere else. And when I ask if you're okay, you say yes, but it doesn't sound like you. I gripped the edge of the sink. I wanted to tell him that sometimes I felt like I was watching my own life from a few feet outside my body. That joy didn't land the same way it used to. That even when he kissed me, even when he held me, there was a thin sheet of glass between us I couldn't break. I'm just stressed, I said instead. He didn't believe me. I could see it in the way his shoulders tightened. But he nodded anyway. Okay, he whispered. And that whisper felt heavier than an argument. Weeks passed. I started losing weight without trying. Food tasted like nothing. Music didn't move me. Colors felt muted. Ethan tried everything. He planned a surprise weekend trip to Maine, a small cabin near the water, because he remembered I once said the ocean made me feel alive. I stood on the shore, wind whipping my hair, staring at the waves. You used to love this, he said softly behind me. I do, I answered. But I didn't feel it. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, chin resting on my shoulder. Talk to me, Maddie. There it was. That plea. Not demanding. Begging. I swallowed. I don't know what's wrong with me. My voice cracked, and suddenly I was crying, not dramatically, not loudly, but in a quiet, defeated way that scared even me. I wake up and I feel dim, I whispered. Like someone turned the brightness down on my life. He turned me to face him, hands on my cheeks. Then we fix it. It's not a broken sink, Ethan. Then we figure it out, he said, firmer now. Doctor. Therapist. Whatever it is. You don't just fade on me. Fade. The word hit hard. Because that's exactly what it felt like I was doing. The diagnosis came 2 weeks later. Severe depression. Clinical. Chemical. Not situational. The doctor's voice was calm, clinical, detached. Ethan's hand gripped mine so tightly I thought my fingers might bruise. "She's going to be okay, right?" he asked before I could. "We'll start treatment," the doctor replied carefully. "Medication. Therapy. It may take time." Time. Such a simple word. Such a terrifying one. On the drive home, the car was silent. "I'm sorry," I said finally. Ethan's head snapped toward me. "Don't. I feel like I'm ruining everything." "You think loving you is conditional?" His voice shook now, not with anger, but emotion. "You think I only signed up for the bright days?" Tears slid down my face again. "I don't even recognize myself." "Then I'll hold on to you until you do," he said. He reached over, resting his hand on my knee. "I'm not going anywhere." It was the same promise he had made months ago. I believed he meant it. I just didn't know what it would cost him. Medication made me nauseous at first, then numb. Therapy forced me to open doors I had nailed shut years ago. Grief about my mother, fear of abandonment, the constant pressure I put on myself to be extraordinary. Ethan came to appointments when I asked. Sat in waiting rooms flipping through outdated magazines. Cooked when I couldn't. Cleaned when I forgot. Held me through nights when panic crawled up my spine for no clear reason. But I saw it. The toll. The way he watched me now, not just with love, but with vigilance. Like I was something fragile that might shatter without warning. And the worst part? Sometimes I wanted him to let go. Not because I didn't love him, but because loving someone while you're drowning feels selfish. One night, after I had canceled yet another dinner with friends, he finally broke. "I don't know how to reach you anymore," he said, pacing the living room. "I'm right here," I whispered again, but even I could hear how hollow it sounded. "No, Maddie," he said, running a hand through his hair. "You're disappearing in front of me, and I don't know how to stop it." His voice cracked. And that was the moment something shifted. Not in me. In him. Fear turned into frustration. Frustration into helplessness. And helplessness into something heavier. We stood there, inches apart, both aching, both exhausted. "I love you," he said, almost desperately. "I know. But love, I was beginning to understand, doesn't automatically fix what's broken inside your mind." And that realization was the crack in our foundation. That was the night I saw it. The first flicker of doubt in his eyes. Not doubt in his love, but doubt in whether love would be enough to save me. And for the first time since we met in that bookstore, I felt truly afraid. Love doesn't always leave. Sometimes it just grows quiet. At first, Ethan's silence was gentle, protective. The kind that wraps around you like a blanket because words would only make things worse. But slowly, almost invisibly, it changed. I noticed it in the mornings. He used to wake me with soft kisses against my temple. Now he would slip out of bed carefully, as if afraid to disturb something fragile. I would hear the shower running, the sound of cabinet doors closing, the quiet click of the front door. And then nothing. One morning, I padded into the kitchen wrapped in his old college sweatshirt. He was standing at the counter, staring into his coffee like it had personally offended him. "Hey," I said. He looked up immediately, and for a second I saw it, that flash of warmth, that instinctive love. "Hey," he answered. But it didn't reach his eyes the way it used to. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" He hesitated. "Deadlines. Work." I nodded. I didn't push, but I knew him. And that silence wasn't about deadlines. It was about me. Depression had hollowed parts of me out, but it had sharpened something else, my sensitivity. I could feel shifts in him the way you feel pressure changes before a storm. He wasn't angry. He wasn't distant in a dramatic way. He was tired. The kind of tired that seeps into your bones when you've been holding someone else up for too long. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. and found his side of the bed empty. The apartment was dark except for a faint glow from the living room. He was sitting on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at nothing. "Ethan?" He flinched, like I had caught him somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. "Sorry. Didn't mean to wake you. Why aren't you sleeping?" He exhaled slowly. "Couldn't." I walked over and sat beside him. For a while, we just listened to the hum of the refrigerator. Then he said something that scared me more than any argument could have. "I don't know how to help you anymore." His voice was steady. Too steady. I turned toward him. You are helping me. He shook his head. No. I'm watching you drown in slow motion. His jaw tightened, like he regretted saying it. I keep thinking if I say the right thing, or do the right thing, or love you the right way, you'll come back. I'm still here, I whispered. He looked at me then, really looked at me. I know, he said. That's what makes it so hard. Over the next few weeks, something inside him began to unravel. He threw himself into work. Stayed late. Came home smelling like cold air and stress. When I asked about his day, he'd give short answers. Fine. Busy. Nothing interesting. The man who once talked for hours about building designs and future dreams now barely mentioned them. One evening, I found a stack of crumpled sketches in the trash, intricate architectural drawings torn in half. You threw these away? I asked, holding them up. They weren't good. They're beautiful. He shrugged. They don't matter. The words hit me like a slap. Since when did his dreams not matter? That's when I understood. It wasn't just me fading. He was dimming too. We started arguing in whispers. Not explosive fights. Just low, exhausted exchanges that left bruises without raising voices. You don't have to fix me, I told him one night. I know. Then stop acting like you failed. He laughed, but it wasn't amused. You think this feels like success? I didn't know what to say. Because part of me knew the truth. He had built his identity around being steady. Reliable. The one who never left. And now he was facing something he couldn't control. He hated that. Not because he was selfish. But because he loved deeply. And loving deeply meant feeling helpless deeply too. One Sunday, we visited my mother's grave. It had been months since I'd gone. The air was cold and sharp. The sky stretched gray above us. I stood there quietly, staring at her name carved in stone. She was strong, Ethan said softly beside me. She didn't feel strong at the end. Strength isn't about how you feel, he replied. It's about staying. I looked at him. You're staying, I said. He didn't answer. And in that silence, I felt it. The weight he was carrying. The fear he would never admit out loud. What if staying wasn't enough? That night, he finally cracked. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But in a way that changed everything. We were sitting on the floor, backs against the couch, like we used to in the beginning. I'm scared, he said suddenly. It was the first time I'd heard that word from him. Of what? I asked. Of losing you. You're not losing me. He shook his head. You're slipping through my hands, and I don't know how to hold tighter without hurting you. His voice broke on the last word. And there it was. His unraveling. Not rage. Not abandonment. Just a man who loved someone so much that watching her fade felt like losing oxygen. I don't need you to hold tighter, I said gently. I just need you to sit with me. He looked at me like he wanted to believe that. But he was a fixer. A builder. And sitting still while something collapsed felt like failure. In the weeks that followed, he grew quieter. But not colder. There's a difference. He still made my coffee. Still kissed my forehead. Still whispered, I love you, before sleep. But something in his eyes had changed. He was fighting a battle I couldn't see. Fighting himself. Fighting despair. Fighting the urge to run from something he couldn't repair. And yet, he stayed. Even when staying meant breaking in slow motion. Even when loving me meant watching the woman he met in that bookstore become someone dimmer. His silence wasn't absence. It was effort. It was restraint. It was a war being fought behind steady eyes. And I didn't know it yet. But that war was about to uncover something neither of us expected. There's a difference between sadness and sabotage. For months, I believed my mind had simply turned against me. That this was chemistry. Genetics. Grief resurfacing like a tide I couldn't outrun. But Ethan has always been a builder. And builders notice cracks. It started with something small. Too small, really. One Tuesday afternoon, I forgot my phone at home. Ethan called my office 3 times. When I didn't answer, he left work early, panic already climbing his spine. I thought something happened, he said when he burst through the apartment door and found me sitting on the kitchen floor, staring at nothing. I just lost track of time, I murmured. He knelt in front of me, brushing hair away from my face. You took your meds today? I nodded automatically, but something in my chest tightened. Had I? That night, after I fell asleep, Ethan did something he had never done before. He checked the bottle. 30 pills. Meant to last 30 days. We were on day 23. There were 17 left. The next morning, he didn't accuse me. He didn't even mention it. Instead, he asked gently, "Do you feel like the medication is helping?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Some days I feel flatter." He studied me carefully. "Flatter how?" "Like someone turned the volume down on everything. Even you." That hurt him. I saw it. But he nodded. "I'm going to schedule a follow-up with your doctor." The appointment changed everything. The psychiatrist flipped through her notes, then frowned. "I increased your dosage 3 weeks ago," she said. "You should be feeling some improvement by now." "Increased?" I asked. "Yes. We discussed it over the phone." I looked at Ethan. "I never had that call." The doctor paused. "I spoke to your emergency contact." He confirmed. Ethan's body went rigid. "I never received a call," he said, voice low. The room felt suddenly smaller. "Is it possible someone else answered?" the doctor asked. "No," he said. "Her phone never leaves her side." But it had. That Tuesday. The day I forgot it. On the drive home, neither of us spoke. I could see it in his eyes, not confusion. Calculation. He was replaying timelines. Details. Tiny inconsistencies that I had dismissed because my mind felt too foggy to question them. When we got home, he asked quietly, "Can I see your phone?" I handed it over. He scrolled through recent calls. There it was. An outgoing call to the psychiatrist's office. 21 days ago. 5 minutes long. At 3:12 p.m. I had been at work that afternoon. In a meeting. "I didn't make that call," I whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Someone did." The next piece came from my coworker, Julia. "Hey," she said casually over lunch. "How's your sister doing?" "I don't have a sister." She blinked. "Your sister called the office a few weeks ago. Said it was urgent. You left right after." My heart began pounding. "I left work." "Yeah, you seemed out of it." I didn't remember that day. At all. When I told Ethan, something inside him shifted from fear to fury. Not loud fury. Cold fury. "Who's been around you?" he asked. The answer came too easily. Ryan. My ex. The one I hadn't spoken to in over a year or so, I thought. He had started working in a neighboring building recently. I'd run into him twice in the lobby. Both times, I'd brushed it off as coincidence. But now memory surfaced. A coffee he had insisted on buying me for old time's sake. A conversation that felt strangely foggy afterward. A strange warmth in my limbs. A gap in time I couldn't explain. "Ethan," I whispered, "what if I'm not just sick?" His eyes darkened. "You're not crazy," he said. "And you're not imagining this." Ethan did what he does best. He investigated. He requested phone records. Security footage from my office building. And what we found made my blood run cold. Ryan had entered my building the day of the sister call. Security footage showed him approaching me in the lobby, handing me a coffee, touching my arm. Then, 20 minutes later, me leaving with him. My movement slow, unsteady, like I was underwater. I didn't remember any of it. Not the drive. Not the conversation. Not the call to my doctor. But Ethan remembered something else. The nausea that had started around that time. The sudden worsening of symptoms. The days where I seemed not just depressed, but sedated. "He's been drugging you," Ethan said quietly. The words felt unreal. "No," I breathed. But even as I denied it, pieces aligned. Ryan had always hated losing control. Hated that I had left him. "You don't get to walk away from me and be happy," he once said during our breakup. At the time, I thought it was wounded pride. Now it felt like a threat. Ethan confronted him. I begged him not to go alone. But he did. When he came home, his knuckles were bruised. "You hit him?" I asked, alarmed. He smiled, Ethan said, voice shaking. He smiled when I told him I knew. "What did he say?" "He said you were better when you were fragile. That you needed someone who understood your darkness." My stomach twisted. "He said you were too bright with me." Silence filled the room. Bright. The word hurt more than anything, because that's what had been taken. Not just my energy, not just my stability, my light. And Ethan had watched it dim, blaming himself. We went to the police, filed reports, submitted footage. Medical tests confirmed traces of sedatives inconsistent with my prescriptions. The case moved slowly, but it moved. And for the first time in months, I saw something different in Ethan's eyes. Not helplessness. Purpose. You didn't fade, he told me one night, holding my face in his hands. You were pushed. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I thought I was broken. You were hurt. His voice was steady again, like the man from the bookstore. But harder now. Sharper. Love had shifted in him. It wasn't just warmth anymore. It was fire. And he wasn't going to let what was taken remain lost. Justice doesn't restore what was stolen. It only names it. The investigation stretched for months. Court dates, statements, evidence. Words like felony, premeditated, intent. Clinical language trying to contain something deeply personal. Ryan never looked at me in the courtroom. He looked at Ethan. Like this was still a competition. But Ethan didn't look back. Not once. He kept his eyes forward, jaw set, fingers laced through mine so tightly I could feel his pulse in my palm. When the verdict finally came, guilty, the room didn't erupt like movies promise. There was no triumphant music. No dramatic relief. Just a quiet exhale. And a weight shifting. Ryan was sentenced. Not long enough to erase what he'd done, but long enough to ensure distance. Protection. Consequence. People expected me to feel victorious. I didn't. I felt tired. Healing isn't cinematic. It's slow, uneven, quiet. But something inside me had changed the day the truth came out. The fog didn't vanish overnight. Depression doesn't disappear just because you discover an external cause. But knowing I hadn't imagined my unraveling, that it hadn't been weakness, gave me ground beneath my feet again. And Ethan. Ethan was no longer the same man who laughed in that bookstore. He was deeper now. Quieter in a different way. The bruises on his knuckles faded. But something else had hardened in him. He slept lighter. Woke at small sounds. Checked the locks twice before bed. He said it was habit. I knew it was vigilance. One night, I reached across the bed and found him awake, staring at the ceiling. You don't have to keep guarding me, I whispered. He turned his head slowly. I know. But his body still felt coiled. Ready. Love had transformed him, but not gently. He had gone from builder to protector. From dreamer to defender. And that shift cost him something. He stopped talking about expanding his firm. Stopped sketching late into the night. When I asked why, he shrugged. Different priorities. What priorities? You. The answer should have felt romantic. It didn't. I don't want to be the reason you shrink, I said quietly. He looked almost offended. I'm not shrinking. But he was. Not in strength. In light. He had poured so much into keeping me steady that he'd quietly set parts of himself down. I saw it in the way he declined networking events. In the way he avoided conversations about future projects. In the way he'd say, maybe later, when I suggested he travel for a conference. He had survived the storm. But he had armor now. And armor is heavy. Therapy became something we did together. Not because we were broken, but because we refused to break separately. In one session, our therapist asked Ethan a question that sat between us like a mirror. What did this experience take from you? He didn't answer right away. He rubbed his hands together, thinking. Certainty, he said finally. About what? That if I love someone enough, I can keep them safe. The room went still. I felt tears sting my eyes. You didn't fail, I said. I know that logically, he replied. But when she was fading, I kept thinking I wasn't enough. The vulnerability in his voice felt like glass. For months, he had been my anchor. I hadn't realized he was drowning too. Over time, I began to see the man he was becoming. Not hardened. Not bitter. Stronger in a quieter way. He started sketching again, but the designs were different. Less flashy. More grounded. Spaces with thick walls and open light. Security paired with beauty. Why the shift? I asked one evening as he showed me a new project. He smiled faintly. People deserve to feel safe in the places they love. It wasn't just architecture anymore. It was philosophy. Pain had reshaped him. It had stripped away naivete. But it hadn't stolen his core. If anything, it clarified it. One night, months later, we went back to Harbor Street Books. Same smell of paper and dust. Same rain against the windows. He picked up another copy of The Great Gatsby and flipped through it. "No glitter this time," he said softly. I laughed, a real laugh, full and warm. He looked at me like he was seeing sunrise. "You're glowing again," he whispered. The words caught in my chest. "Because you stayed," I said. He shook his head. "No, because you fought." We stood there in the aisle where it had all begun. Two people altered by love. Scarred by it. Strengthened by it. I used to think love was soft. Now I know it's also fierce. It demands growth. It demands courage. It demands that you become someone new. Ethan had become someone new. Not the carefree man from that first autumn, but a man tempered by fire. And I loved him more for it, even if I knew that kind of transformation never comes without cost. People think the story ends when the danger is gone, when the verdict is read, when the villain disappears, when the couple stands intact on the other side of the storm. But that's not where love proves itself. Love proves itself in the quiet after. In the mornings when nothing dramatic happens. In the way two people learn to breathe normally again. A year after the trial, I woke up before Ethan. Sunlight filtered through the curtains in thin gold lines, warming the floor. For a moment, I just watched him sleep. His face looked softer now, less guarded. The tightness that had lived in his jaw for months had eased. I traced the faint scar across his knuckle, the last visible reminder of the day he confronted Ryan. "You're staring," he mumbled without opening his eyes. I smiled. "You're drooling." He opened one eye. Rude. There it was. Lightness. Not forced. Not fragile. Real. I leaned down and kissed him. And this time, there was no glass between us. No fog. No dimming. Just warmth. Healing didn't happen in a straight line. There were days I still felt shadows brush against my mind. Days when exhaustion crept in without warning. But now I knew the difference between memory and manipulation. Between chemistry and cruelty. And Ethan no longer watched me like I might disappear. He walked beside me. That shift changed everything. One evening, we sat on the rooftop of his building again, the same one where he first said he loved me. The city lights blinked below us, alive and electric. "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" I asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. "Yes," he said honestly. "I wish you'd never been hurt." I nodded. "Me too." A breeze lifted my hair. He tucked it behind my ear, the same gesture from a lifetime ago. But, he continued, if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't know what we're capable of. I looked at him. We were capable before. Not like this. He was right. Before, our love had been bright. Now it was deep. Before, it was effortless. Now it was intentional. And intention is stronger than ease. There's a version of Ethan that existed before all of this. The man who believed love was enough to prevent pain. The man who thought staying meant controlling the outcome. That man doesn't exist anymore. But the man he became? He understands that love doesn't prevent suffering. It walks through it. He no longer promises, nothing bad will happen. Now he says, whatever happens, we face it. And somehow that feels safer. Months later, he proposed in the most Ethan way possible. No flash mob. No grand spectacle. Just the two of us at the harbor, where our first date stretched into 3 hours. The air smelled like salt and memory. "I used to think loving you meant protecting you from everything," he said, hands steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Now I know it means standing with you in anything." He got down on one knee. Not because tradition demanded it, but because humility had reshaped him. "You are not fragile," he continued. "You are not broken. You are the strongest person I know. And loving you has made me stronger too." Tears blurred my vision. "Madeline Hayes, will you marry me?" I laughed through the tears. Yes. There was no audience. No applause. Just wind, water, and two hearts that had learned how to survive. On our wedding day, I walked toward him with steady steps. Not because life was perfect. Not because pain had vanished. But because we had seen each other at our worst, dimmed, scared, unraveling, and chosen to stay. When I reached him, he whispered something no one else heard. "You never disappeared." And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Love and pain are not opposites. They are threads of the same fabric. To love deeply is to risk devastation. To survive it together is to create something unbreakable. Now, years later, when people ask me how we made it through, I don't tell them about courtrooms or medication or fear. I tell them this. There was a night when I felt myself fading. And there was a man who refused to let my light be rewritten as weakness. Not by the world. Not by another man. Not even by me. But what saved us wasn't his strength. It was his choice. Every day. To stay. To grow. To become. Love hurt us. It scarred us. It changed us. But it also rebuilt us into something steadier than we ever were before. And if I've learned anything, it's this. Love isn't proven in the falling. It's proven in the staying. Even where it hurts.